and we will, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. So Paulina is going to start a recording. Oh, she already did. She's on it. Great. And so a quick introduction, just so you know who everybody is today. My name is Melanie Voytovich, and I am the Executive Director and founder of the New Works Project.
My name is Paulina Michels. I am the Percussion Program Manager for the New Works Project.
And my name is Lara Mitofsky Neuss, and I'm the Clarinet Program Manager for the New Works Project.
Awesome. So we're going to start with just a basic, I'm going to ask some basic questions, and then we'll go into more of the dense programming aspects. So I wanted to ask both of you, for everybody else, I know how you became involved with the New Works Project, obviously, but for everyone else, how did you hear about the New Works Project, and what kind of motivated you to become part of the New Works Project?
I guess I'll start. So my friend John told me about it when I was moving from Pittsburgh to Seattle. I was coming out here and kind of stressed because I think I knew one person out here, and he's like, "Oh no, Melanie lives out there. Melanie works with the New Works Project. It's really awesome. Check it out." So I did, and I thought it was really cool. And there weren't any commissions going on at the time, but that was right when the percussion program manager position opened up. So I threw my name in the hat, just, hoping for the best, and it worked out really well. And that's why I'm here.
Cool. And I think it was about 2 or 3 summers ago, where I met Delane Doyle, a percussionist at the Atlantic Music Festival, and he was telling me about this cool commissioning project that he is a part of. And I remember I kept asking more questions like as the days went on, and I was like, this is really cool. I think I want to start something like this in the clarinet world. So he was like, yeah, you should contact Melanie. So I emailed Melanie and was like, I'm really interested in starting something like this. Would that be okay? Or maybe we could join forces. And you wanted to bring on clarinet. So that was really exciting. And that's how I became involved.
Yeah. And so obviously, so for those who don't know, our program managers are responsible for sort of doing most of the composer selection for our season. So first thing is, what skills and knowledge do you two think are the most critical to your roles as the program managers with New Works Project?
I think curiosity is such a big part of it, because even starting out with the project, I felt kind of not nervous, but hesitant to reach out to composers that I didn't know, or put composers that I wasn't super familiar with on the list. And I think getting more comfortable with it and being able to just go down the rabbit hole of a Google search, looking for new composers, looking for new music, and talking to colleagues and trying to find all of these different people that you may have never come across in your life. I think that is such an important skill, and recognizing when that falls by the wayside and you're falling back on people that you're comfortable with, people that you've known for 6 years. I think that's another big part of it for me.
Definitely. I think collaboration too, and connection, and just being involved in the music world, whether it's going to conferences or keeping in touch with friends and colleagues. I feel like the more people you know and the more you put yourself out there, you end up meeting friends of friends and colleagues of colleagues, and you get to know people from all different backgrounds. And yeah, and it's really cool to find those people and to see if they'd be a good fit for our project.
And I wanted to touch on one thing, Paulina, that you mentioned. You said going down the list, and for people who don't know, our process. So we, both Paulina and Lara, create sort of a list of potential composers that they have found that they are interested in one day commissioning. So we have a list of people we think fit our aesthetic and fit our mission for inclusivity. And I review that list just to double check, verify, are we actually representing a number of different voices, and, put notes regarding that. But the final selection, once all those are approved, are ultimately up to Paulina and Lara to then select their top 2 choices for the next season, and then a 2 as sort of a backup if someone's not available because they have a full commission schedule, or perhaps our commission model just doesn't work for them. So that's what the list is that we're referencing. So that's a good segue, though. So since you two are sort of the final deciders, what kind of process do you personally go through when you're deciding what composer to commission next?
So going off a list, obviously there's a lot that goes into even just putting people on that list and going through the selection process of whether or not that's an option, whether or not they fit the mission, whether or not they're interested. I try to look at contrasting composers, looking at not just within the year, within the season, finding 2 people who have very distinctly different voices and come from different places and bring a totally different voice to the project. I'm also looking at previous years and who we commissioned in the last season or the season before that, or who I want to commission in 2 years, and trying to find a way to make sure that we're including a bunch of different people from different backgrounds, different education levels, different racial races, different, I don't know, a little bit of everything, and just trying to make sure that we are not falling into the same pattern of, all of the, I'm losing my words here, going down the rabbit hole, as it were. Maybe you want to jump in, Lara.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I've fallen into this, especially when I first started commissioning, is if you just go for whose music you like, you could accidentally, everyone in that group may just happen to be from one race or one gender or one school or one background, location. So you want to make sure and have that in the back of your mind to just, when we're making those lists, to have it be really diverse. And make sure that people from all different backgrounds are there. And then looking at the seasons, like you said, just making sure, since we only have 2 of each instrumental commission per season, making sure the season is well balanced, as well as the last 5 years, things like that. For clarinets, well, the first year, but we'll get there. And in terms of the process, from the original question, I think it's a combination of kind of like, sometimes I reach out to colleagues whose opinion I trust, seeing who they're, composers that they've worked with that they would highly recommend. And sometimes I go to composers I trust and I see who they're collaborating with, or I go to concerts and I save the programs, or things like that, as to how the actual, process of finding them is.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about how it's very easy to, I think both of you mentioned this, just fall back on the composers that you know and the music that you've heard and you've enjoyed. And that's something that actually, if you take a look at the first like 3 or 4 commissions that the New Works Project did when it was just me doing it by myself, that's almost exactly what it was. Like it's all white men, which, is
Right.
the music that you're most frequently hearing. And so I'm more exposed to these composers. And so I reached out to them to compose, in which, of course, they also compose some great music, but it wasn't showing, the great depth of music that's available and voices that are available in composing. And I think after those 4 commissions, I kind of realized, I'm also falling into this really easy trap that can happen when you're not putting that thoughtfulness into your programming, which we also noticed can be a challenge with, we're looking at now, our university training. The level of education that our composers have are all, doctorate level composers most frequently, and we are lacking a little bit of the, that's a voice in its own, going through a university set Eurocentric program. So, which brings me to my next question, which I partially answered some of. But so, what do you think are the biggest challenges that our organization faces when we are programming composers, or that we have faced?
Yeah, I think it's definitely similar to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Falling into that rabbit hole of just going after maybe composers we know or have already heard of, and just making sure that we are pulling from different backgrounds. I know the school thing has been a big one because certain schools do have like just a slew of awesome composers, and that's great. But there's also lots of composers from other schools too, or maybe a handful of composers from another school that we don't know about just because we happen to know people, from a certain demographic or a certain location. And I think that's one of the hardest parts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The education background is one that I've just started keying into in I think the last couple months, and it's kind of startling. I mean, there are so many schools with so many wonderful composers coming out of them, but there are also, undergraduate students or students who have no formal training that could be really, really incredible additions to the world of percussion music, the world of clarinet music. And I think finding those composers is certainly a challenge. And then again, just having to narrow it down to 2 composers per season, man, that's so hard because there are so many incredible people out there and you want to reach out to all of them and you want to support all of their music. But finding out which ones are going to be the best fit for the time is really, really challenging.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Having two a season, it definitely makes it challenging to be really encompassing, and definitely leaves some gaps in our programming. It's taking us longer to be like fully inclusive of all of the voices we want to include, just because of how spread out our program really is. Well, with that, are there any gaps that you've identified with our programming that you'd like to fill in the future, that you like voices that we feel are still missing? Like, obviously we've talked about, the schooling aspect, and having different levels of education present. But is there anything else kind of that you've noticed?
I would like to reach out to more people outside of the United States, because I think we do have commissioners that live all over the world, and I would really love to start representing the voices from where they come from, where they live, and the familiarity of that, and bringing that into, the United States, where maybe that feels like a really different kind of music, or an uneasy kind of, not yet uneasy, that's not the word I want. But you know what I'm saying, right? Kind of.
Yeah.
Does everyone know what I'm saying?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I think it's easy to stay in the United States because that's our background, but like non-Western countries too, and composers we might never get to meet because they might live in like South America, or somewhere where we might not really go, often or ever, and to include them. And I think it's really cool that we have Katarina coming up from Canada, and Canada I feel like is very it's definitely one of the easier countries we can include too. I feel like I know a good number of Canadian composers now, so it's kind of just like doing that work, like we were saying before, to just keep in mind that we need to keep it going. And I think the race one is a big one. I think for the gap, because you said, Melanie, like before it was a lot of white men. So I think now is a good time for us to try to change that, or to include non-white men, maybe more than white men for now. And then as the years go on, it can balance out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And when I started to realize that programming specifically, we started to more focus on including women composers, and but that left the gap still of not necessarily including race in that. So it became a gender thing and or an awareness of gender, and then um, it's kind of been compounding. Now we're becoming more aware of the race disparity we have in our composers and education. So there's a lot of work that we can keep doing as an organization. Um, so I'm going to throw a question out at you that isn't on the list, our list of questions. So a thought that I had with us trying to find those other composers, right, that are not in our circle and that, we don't have connections to or aren't easy to find, like maybe students who go to I think it was Yale. We have a lot of Yale composers, right, um, on our site. And so the privilege that they have, right, is that a lot of them have websites, they have people who have played their music, and so they have a lot of recordings. And do you feel like, to some extent, like equity also makes it the equity of access to that kind of, having those resources is really impacting your ability to find those people?
Oh, for sure. Because unless you're hearing someone or someone else perform a piece live, or you've stumbled upon it somehow through a friend who's like, hey, check out this really cool piece of music. There's no recording, composer doesn't have a website, but it's really cool and really interesting. Then what are the chances that you're going to find those composers who don't have video and audio recordings and don't have active websites or don't have social media? It makes it so challenging to find people who are a little more under the radar.
Yeah, I think it takes more work on our end.
Yeah.
And I just have to keep reminding myself of that. Like maybe there is someone who I can't find their, website, or, I can't find something on Facebook. I can't find something anywhere. Maybe it's that I need to contact that, or I need to see if I can find them through someone I know or through contacting someone else, and that getting in touch with that person, like through email or something like that, may not be as easy, and maybe getting the recordings like that if they can, just putting in the extra work. And someone in the chat mentioned Instagram. That's something we don't really think about, but it's so big in some, certain age groups, or really everyone. I guess it just depends if you're into Instagram or into Twitter. There's all these communities that if we don't, like, I'm not really on Twitter a lot, but there's this huge community there. And in a way, I'm missing out, by not being super involved there. And I can meet a lot of people. Twitter is fun. Yeah, it is.
I had a follow-up question, and totally forgot what it was. We were talking about, okay, yes. So, and the next step with that, well, once we find those composers that didn't have all those resources, don't have a lot of recordings, the next step, right, the challenge becomes marketing those people as a composer to sign up for a commission when we don't have recordings, we don't have samples, they don't have a website to check out. Do you feel like, what level of obligation then do we have to create those resources and like fill that gap?
It's difficult because then that adds this whole other time and expense and effort on our end. But I think if you find someone that you really believe in, that you think is going to be a great addition to the project and is going to bring something incredible to the world of percussion clarinet music, and is, you can get people behind their music, then I think it would be worthwhile to spend the time, even if it's just, us performing in our studios and recording a percussion solo or a clarinet solo, and getting a little bit of their music recorded so that people can get a taste for how incredible that could be. So I think we do have at least a little bit of an obligation to put their music out there if that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also an opportunity for us to be innovative, like having chats like these, or um, you know, focusing more on the mission of that composer and us putting that on our social media and talking about that. And so even if someone may not be able to hear their recording via a composer's website or YouTube or something, they will get a feel that our mission aligns with that composer's mission and why we're showcasing this music.
Yeah. So Danielle just popped in with 2 questions, and I'm gonna take them out of order. I haven't been watching the chat before, sorry. So along with this one, that I want to chat about have you found it difficult to fill spots, consortium spots, when the composer isn't as well known? And I'll let you, I don't know if either of you feel ready to talk about this, but I do. But if you have anything to say, you can pop in first, and I can add to that.
No, I think go for it.
The second question?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So, well, because I don't know, is Bethany a well-known composer in the clarinet world?
I don't know if Bethany has, I think this is probably one of her first or second clarinet works.
Okay.
I would say in the composer world, yes, very known in the new music community for sure, but I'm not sure that like every clarinetist I know would know of her.
Okay. So the short answer is yes. When I made that switch from doing Elliot Cole and Wally Gunn and Dave Molk, people, white men who are really well known, and we switched over to Jury, who I thought was pretty well known, or Alyssa Weinberg. I had seen them both featured with Vic, or Alyssa featured with Vic Firth, and there was I don't remember who produced the Wah video, but I had seen those around and, learned about them through other people, so I assumed that they were pretty well known. And they were both very hard to fill, and I assumed at first that was because they were women, but Annika filled up pretty fast. I think she filled up within a week. But it is definitely very laborious on our side to get people behind names that they haven't heard before. So that's why I asked some of that question, like, what do we owe to these composers who haven't received these resources that others have and hadn't had the opportunity to really build their name? And how much work do we owe to make up for that? Or should we be doing to sort of remedy that disparity and equity? And then Bethany's still hasn't filled either, and hers comes out on August 1st. Still has 9 spots. So, but she has sent her entire score in, and Lara recorded some of it. So again, we were talking about, we're trying to create a video to sort of market, this is what you're getting, so people have a reference point. Instead of not knowing the name, they have a reference point of the aesthetic that they're buying into. Mm-hmm. Did you have anything to add to that, or
no? No. So I was agreeing.
Okay.
Excitedly agreeing.
All right, I will ask you too this one first. So have any composers felt tokenized due to the equity model of the New Works project? I haven't heard anything specifically from composers, but I do have comments on that in general.
I have not heard anything specific from composers either.
I haven't heard anything specific either, but I have been really thinking about that recently and trying to understand that. To make sure, because it is a very easy thing to do, to say, a lot of our music organization may say, okay, we have that one composer who's not white, we've filled our
Yeah.
quota. And that's just another form of racism or inclusivity. So I'm continually trying to understand that we just need to be equally inclusive all the time. We can't create these separate programs because that's not helping the issue.
Right, and that's what I've heard from some of my friends that are people of color that talk about these programs that are specifically made just for people of color are just another way of, forget the phrasing that they use, but it's not changing the normal, right? We want the standard to be that these people, like everybody is included, right? That we have equal representation of gender expression and race and education, and that we are making up for the lack of inclusion in other programs, but we are not doing it as an exclusionary. We are not including white people because they still exist. Can I pop into this chat? You wanted to add to this question?
No, well, it's easier to say it than to type it. So it's a challenge. I hear what you're saying, because like I have mixed feelings. Things like hit like a girl contest because it's only women, and so it's like effectively it's separating women and men, and so that's my issue with it. However, it's also good because there's no platform that exists to celebrate women. It's like I'm doing this project right now that's all women, and I've been thinking about it. It's like, how do you promote this, or how do you talk about this? It's like, okay, we're excluding men, but it's a challenging, because it's a really challenging concept, because it's like, how are you going to create this equity without doing something? And the path through which to do that might involve doing something that excludes men, or that excludes, I mean, it basically comes down to white men when you're including people of color. And then that becomes racist too, but that's how we promote these people's work. Like it's by doing something rather than complaining and sitting and complaining about it. It's just a really challenging balance to hit. I don't have an answer. I'm just like going through these questions in my head.
But, yeah. And that totally makes sense. And I think that having those spaces is also important. Where it's a space just for women, like I'm going to say I think it's the Boulanger, forget the
initiative.
Yes, that one. So like a space for women composers. Like, I think that's also important. That's not exactly our niche. And we want it to be more of, for anyone who went to PASIC last year, the Focus Day, I thought was fantastically programmed by Tim Feeney and Stuart. I forget his last name, Stuart. Stuart Gerber, I think.
Gerber?
Yeah. Yeah. And it it was an actual reflection of our diverse community without being intentionally exclusionary to anybody. And so it felt like I saw a lot of representation in there, and it was a fantastically programmed day. And that's kind of my goal for New Works Project, is to have that seemingly effortless like representation of everybody, while in behind the scenes it's not actually effortless. Like, I'm sure they put in tons of work to make sure that it looked that way, and that it was programmed so well. So that it is definitely a line, I think, especially with so few commissions, to have it possibly look like tokenism or feel like tokenism.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to think long-term scheme, and including our entire program, what is represented. And imagine, like, we had put this all on a concert program all together, as we will be doing. What does that program look like?
Right. And I think from what Gloria was saying, maybe, let's say you do a concert of all women, which is great. And I think it only becomes an issue if you go back to concerts of all men for 4 years after that, But like, I feel like having concerts of specific people of specific backgrounds can be really powerful. I just think we can't only do that when we're responding to, people saying we're not diverse enough. We need to just, like you said, and then in a few years, it just quietly levels out, I think, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So let me read this comment from Gloria. Yeah, that's true. I mean, in any, I'm reading White Fragility right now, and that's a lot of that dynamic is talked about in that book, of where the people in power are really the ones who need to make the decision to uplift the people below them to the same level. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work in the other direction. From basic talking about like women's suffrage, men are the women that got, or men are the people who got to decide if women got to vote. They had all the power, and seemingly, later on, making sure that Black women got to vote, because that didn't include people of color. So, or Black women, Black people specifically. So, it's really, yeah, we need men to do the work too. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's the same thing here with, we are 3 white women. And so we also have some power with us as well. And we need to use that responsibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Did I miss any questions? I think there was one at the top. Did we? Ooh, I didn't see this one. What happens if a composer doesn't write down the music? How do you commission a work?
So like they don't create a score because they want to create something else? Is that what that means?
Well, I wonder if that means, are we gonna get a? No. How like some like frame drumming music isn't taught typically through sheet music. I mean, you can write it out and it does exist, but standardly they would teach it orally.
And that could be a really interesting project, to have one where instead of making a score, a composer teaches through a video or something like that. That could be really interesting. It would bring a whole different approach to learning music and sharing music to the project. I think that'd be really exciting.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that does also add another issue of equity, though, for people who don't have access to the internet. Like, I mean, I guess if people don't have access to the internet, we're not doing a good job of reaching them right now in general. We're very online. But yeah, I would totally be open to doing something like that in the future. And that's something I hadn't thought of. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Gloria asked, and I'm not sure if we answered, how do we seek out or find composers outside of North America or Europe? That's tough.
It's definitely tough, because you can always search on Google, but a lot of times what you're going to find is the really, really popular, very well known, pretty high up and well established composers. You're not going to find the people that are underrepresented and that need their voices amplified. So I think speaking with like international students was a great opportunity while in school, getting to talk to people who are from all over the world, just asking, who are some composers from your country that are really interesting? Whose music do you love playing? Whose music do you love listening to? Why do you love it? What about it makes it unique to your place? And I think you can stick with that when you're out of school. You make these incredible connections with people from all over the world, especially now that we have the internet and that communication is so easy. It's easy to reach out to someone in Central America or South America or Asia even, and to talk to these people about what they're playing and what they're listening to and what's going on the ground level in their countries.
Yeah, I really think that that's the key, is reaching out to other performers and composers that are in those countries. If you can find one that will work with you, that's great. Like I know one of our participants is from Spain and it's part of Europe, yes. But it's a place that, you know, I have never been to, and I don't know many people or composers that are living in Spain. And he has been very interactive with the project and always always willing to share some thoughts or, you know, wanting to share what's going on in Spain. And, you know, that's having resources like that involved with the project. You know, who are the composers in your area that we might be able to work with, could definitely, you know, will add to the project. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we hit them all. Let me do one last check. Yes. Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us. We went a few minutes over, but I was really enjoying all these great questions at the end. Thank you for those and that conversation. And thank you, Paulina and Lara, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right, and we hope you all have a great day.
All right.
All right. Bye.